What's up guys, and welcome to the ultimate BMW M5 generations comparison video. In this video, we're going to try to compare as many generations of M5 as possible. I don't know for sure if we'll be able to get all generations in today, but we're out here in Pittsboro, North Carolina, and we're going to start off with the granddaddy E28 generation. The owner Harris has been kind enough to give me a go in his minty original E28 with 155,000 miles on the odometer. The interior really well kept. So this is a 1988 model year. It does have a few mods on it: a Fahey crank hub, a Jim Conforti performance chip, cold air intake, E34 rear brakes, and then for suspension, we've got Bilstein shocks and ST springs. Since this is a US spec model, it has the S38 3.5 liter inline six naturally aspirated, making 256 horsepower. The Euro version came with 282 horsepower from its M88 engine. This weighs 3,500 pounds. It has recirculating ball steering, something that the E34 and E39 generation M5s also had. Very 1980s interior. I just hopped out of an E30 M3 not too long ago, and this feels very much the same era. Seating position is a little high for my liking, but actually it fits the character of this car. More laid back M car compared to what we're used to nowadays. Look at the 360 visibility in this thing. Designed and built back in an era where safety standards definitely weren't what they are today. Very simple 3-spoke steering wheel, dedicated buttons for everything. I mean, look at this. A series of buttons you can use to measure your miles per hour, miles per gallon, etc, etc. Anyways, away we go. Very easy, smooth clutch engagement. Now the shifter is interesting. This has a very different shift knob than what I'm used to with BMWs. It doesn't have that sort of pistol grip feel of most BMW shift knobs. Very comfortable car, softly sprung, and it's heavy at 3,500 pounds. That heft helps it feel more solid and a bit more luxurious. It's a far more refined ride than an E30 M3. This is a shockingly easy to drive car at low speed. Very forgiving inputs. And let's see what happens when the road opens up and gets a little bit more twisty. Wow, that inline six sound, the silky smoothness that only a BMW inline six can provide. I guess this is where it started for the M5, and why the later E34 generation also came with a naturally aspirated inline six. 256 horsepower doesn't sound like a lot today, but when you have such a linear power band and torque everywhere, it doesn't really matter. It still feels adequately quick in a straight line. You know what? For recirculating ball steering, this actually feels pretty good. There's a little bit of play on center, but once you get the steering loaded up in the corner, there's plenty of feedback actually. The steering ratio also isn't as slow as I expected. Oh wow, there's a lot of lean in the corners. Even with upgraded Bilstein shocks and ST springs, this thing is still kind of a roly-poly thing. It's not a car that likes to be hustled too quickly, especially in the direction changes. You feel the mass. This doesn't have your fancy rear wheel steering or adaptive dampers or active anti-roll bars to hide its weight. And that's okay. This just feels very natural. You never have to guess what's going on underneath you. It feels very connected to the road. The steering really is beautiful. It's really easy to downshift. Rev matching is a cinch. Woo. Love that sound. you turn into a corner a little bit hot, but it's very gradual. It never feels like it's gonna snap on you without letting you know well in advance. It's interesting. All three cars I've driven so far, the 2002 E30 M3 and this E28 M5, all have an issue where this driver's side window doesn't go all the way up, and so we get a lot of wind noise into the cabin. Fifth gear, 80 miles an hour, and the engine's spinning at around 3,200 RPM. So the gearing is actually relatively long. It really utilizes this broad torque curve of the inline six very effectively. Look how easy it is to rev match. That first to second shift is actually really nice. It's short. The engine stays above 4,500 RPM when you shift at the red line, which is around 6,500. Now, isn't this the ultimate dichotomy? E28 M5 following a Tesla Model 3. Kitchen appliance versus the ultimate driving machine that can still seat 5 people comfortably. I know which one I would take. Listen to this. Is unreal. Well, there's that body roll. And this thing just handles the bumps on this road so well. I do get a little nervous in these fourth gear sweepers because the car just feels like it's gonna roll over almost. The inputs of this car, the pedals, the steering, even to some extent the shifter, they have a bit of travel to them. So you have to take your time. It's not a car that wants to be rushed. Even though the performance is there, at least for 1988 standards, it's still a pretty relaxed driving experience, and that's what I love about it. The M5 isn't supposed to be a lightweight, nimble sports car. That's what the M3 is for. The M5 is a car that gives you that feeling of build quality and solidness and the ability to carry people in the back seat comfortably. It's an everyday usable sedan that eggs you on to take the scenic route every now and then. Because at the end of the day, this still is very much an M division product. It has the powertrain, it has the suspension, the brakes, the chassis tuning, and if I'm being quite honest, an M5 would probably fit my lifestyle better than the M3. What a way to kick off this video. We're not going to be able to fit all generations of M5 into a single video, so I will split this up into parts. If you stick around long enough, I'll share my thoughts on how these generations compare. But this E28 M5 sets a very high bar indeed. A big shout out to Harris. Let's go see what the other generations have to offer. Alright guys, we're now in a 2001 E39 generation M5. This has always been my favorite looking, driving, everything about it has just been perfect for me. Out of all the M5 generations, granted, I haven't driven all of them. After today, I will have, but this one has always held a special place in my heart. This particular example is a 2001 model year. It has the very rare anthracite exterior with a tan interior. Only 37 of these were ever made with this color combo. This one is completely bone stock with the exception of an aftermarket muffler. The steering wheel was also replaced with a brand new unit from BMW. Apparently this cost about $1,000. Everything else about the car is about as mint as an E39 can be. This has the upgraded head unit, helps to freshen up the interior of the car a little bit. So the E39, of course, is powered by the S62 5-liter naturally aspirated V8, rated for 395 horsepower, 369 pound-feet of torque. The car weighs about 4,000 pounds, so it is quite heavy, and it has servotronic hydraulic recirculating ball steering. Now, what that means is that it's not a traditional rack and pinion, just like the E28 we just drove, but the servotronic technology actually can divert some of the hydraulic steering fluid and make the steering feel a little bit heavier. Let's see if that actually makes any difference when we get going here. first thing you notice when you drive an E39, and I say this being a former E39 owner, I had a 540i M Sport 6-speed manual, is just how solidly built this car feels. It is a vast improvement over the E28, which is 2 generations older, in terms of build quality. I've said this before and I'll say it again, this era of BMW design is my favorite. The exterior look of this car is truly timeless, as is the E46. And the interior, dated, yes, but it doesn't feel archaic. Maybe in 10-20 years it will, but as of 2024, this is the sweet spot in my opinion. And this is another car that doesn't hide its weight at 4,000 pounds. But this engine, listen to this. There's the rev limiter, just below 7,000 RPM. Let's press the sport button here. So what the sport button does is it heightens the throttle response, since this is drive-by-wire, and it opens up that diverter valve for the steering, so it becomes less assisted and you get a little bit more heft to the steering feel, which is really nice. My old 540i didn't have this feature. Even just cruising around partial throttle, this engine is a masterpiece. It's not the highest revving engine, it doesn't have the greatest specific output. 5 liters, just under 400 horsepower, that's a little less than 80 horsepower per liter. It doesn't hold a candle to the S54 in the E46 M3, for example, but you get that low-end V8 torque and you get that beautiful induction note. It's an engine that is very well suited to this chassis. This is first and foremost an everyday drivable, luxurious, full-size sedan. But when you do want to have some fun with it, down a couple gears, oh wow. Doesn't have the best brake feel, I will admit. A little bit soft. The car has overall just sort of lazy responses. And you know what? I like it more for that. It's not an overly darty, super twitchy M car. It's not trying to be an M3. This is its own thing. This is the M car for the more, maybe more mature owner. That's how I would describe it. But it's still every bit as enjoyable as those sharper M cars because of the breadth of its ability. This car can do everything. I daily drove my 540i for a couple of years and it was so comfortable, so refined. But my 540i didn't make that sound and it didn't pull that hard. This engine is so enjoyable. On paper, it's not the most special V8 in the world, but again, it's so well matched to this chassis. It manages to not feel overpowered or underpowered. It's just right. 400 horsepower, 4,000 pounds. It has usable power. You can actually enjoy revving this engine out without going into the triple digits. That's what I love about it. Very easy to heel toe, great throttle response despite being drive-by-wire. Just nail those heel toe rev matches. The shifter throws are pretty long. This is the stock shifter, but it's very easy to use. There is some rubberiness, I've said that in basically every manual BMW review I've done. Still very much here with the E39. With the longer throws combined with the medium effort makes it a very relaxed shifting experience. Again, very well balanced with the rest of the car. You have to be more intentional and not rush this car too much. What an engine. And again, the usability of the straight line performance is what's so enjoyable about this generation. I have a feeling that when we hop into the later generations with the turbocharged engines, and maybe even that E60 M5 with the V10, that extra 100, 200 horsepower will just make those cars feel a little bit less enjoyable on a public road. Now that's just a hypothesis. We'll have to get into those cars and see if that's even remotely true. But right now I am just fully enjoying this E39. Everything about it is just so well balanced. That's the best word I can use to describe it. Same with the E46. And again, that's why this generation of BMW M cars has always been my favorite in all regards. It's not too little, not too much, just right. The suspension, it soaks up the bumps. It's soft, but it's supple. You can drive this car every day. It feels like a proper luxury sedan. And the heft of this car, all 4,000 pounds of it, give it a solid feeling that even the E46 doesn't have. And compared to the E28, and again, that's why we're really here, we're comparing M5 generations, this feels just so much more buttoned down. It really is a car that I could see myself driving every single day. In fact, if I never got my 540i M Sport and got one of these instead, there's a good chance I would still own it to this day. This is, again, one of my favorite sports sedans of all time. The 540i, while I did appreciate it, it just wasn't special enough to convince me to put the investment into it, to make it nice. That was a sub $8,000 car at the time, while the E39 M5 was still a $30,000+ car. But the maintenance costs are about the same. You could argue that the E39 is even more reliable because this engine doesn't have the timing chain guide issue, and this steering, despite being recirculating ball, when I have it in sport mode, which increases the steering effort, it feels really good, very linear. You feel a good amount of what's happening underneath you with those front tires. It's not brimming full of feedback, but similar to the E46, it has a very natural feeling to it. And there's actually more weight with the E39, which I prefer. I really like this servotronic system. So with that being said, between the E28 and the E39 so far, hands down, E39 all day, every day. While the E28 truly is a time capsule of a car, it's a fourth or fifth or sixth car, if that makes sense. It's something that you're definitely not going to drive every day. While refined for the time, it's nowhere near as refined as this E39, and the driving dynamics aren't as good either. This E39 moved the bar forward in so many ways. So that said, let's hop into the other generations and see if any of them can overtake this E39 as my favorite M5 of all time.